I worked 2 jobs to fund my sister's lavish life, until she called me a failure, and then I still remember the day my sister, Lena Parker, got into college. She was 17 at the time, full of confidence and dreams bigger than our small town could hold. My parents were ecstatic, like someone had announced we'd won the lottery. My mom screamed loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, and my dad picked her up in a bear hug, spinning her around like she was 6 years old again. Meanwhile, Lena clutched that acceptance letter from Lakewood University in Chicago like it was the golden ticket to Willy Wonka's factory. I stood in the corner, watching it all unfold, my hands shoved into my pockets. Don't get me wrong, I was proud of her. Lena always talked about getting out of this town, about making something of herself. She dreamed of becoming a CEO or some hotshot lawyer, something important that would make people stop and take notice. She was the one everyone in the family pointed to as going places. Me? I was just Sam, the quiet, reliable older brother who had settled into life early. I dropped out of college after my first year. It wasn't because I couldn't handle the work, but because I couldn't afford it. Tuition, books, rent, it all added up too fast, and I wasn't about to bury myself in debt that I'd be paying off until I was gray. So, I did the practical thing. I found work as a mechanic, something I was actually good at. Fixing cars gave me a kind of satisfaction I never found in a classroom. It was simple. Something was broken. I fixed it. I liked the way oil stained my hands, the way engines roared back to life after hours of careful tinkering. I had dreams too, small ones. I was saving up for a house, something modest, with just enough room for me and maybe a dog. I didn't need much, just something that was mine. When Lena got into that fancy private university in Chicago, we all knew the price tag would be steep, but no one said it out loud. I think we were all pretending that it would somehow work out because, well, it had to. Lena was going to be somebody, and this was her chance. At first, the money issue started small, so small I barely noticed. One evening at dinner, my mom casually dropped a hint. You know, college is so expensive these days, she said, shaking her head and giving me this look, like I should know what she was getting at. I glanced up from my plate of mashed potatoes. Yeah, I guess so, I replied, not sure what else to say. She deserves this opportunity, Sam. My dad chimed in, his voice firm but kind. You believe that, right? Of course, I said automatically. And I did believe it. Lena worked hard in high school, top of her class, captain of the debate team, you name it. She earned her shot. It started with her textbooks. Lena called me in a panic about 2 weeks into her first semester. Sam, I can't buy my books, she said. They cost almost $300, and I don't have enough. Can you help me out? Just this once. I hesitated, but only for a second. Yeah, sure, no problem, I said. Family helps family, right? I transferred the money that night and didn't think much of it. She promised she'd pay me back eventually, and I believed her. But just this once turned into every month. Lena didn't have a part-time job. She said she didn't have time between her classes and extracurriculars. Her financial aid didn't cover everything, and my parents, well, they were scraping by themselves. My mom worked part-time at a bakery, and my dad worked in a factory. There wasn't much left over at the end of the month, so the calls kept coming. Hey, Sam, can you send me $50 for groceries? Then it became, my rent's due, and I'm short $200. I don't know what to do. At first, I didn't mind. I told myself it was temporary. I was already working as a mechanic during the day, and I picked up some evening shifts at a warehouse to make ends meet. I'd wake up at 5, work until noon fixing cars, grab a quick sandwich in my truck, and then head to the warehouse for the night shift. I'd stumble home after midnight, too tired to do anything but fall into bed and start it all over again the next day. It wasn't a glamorous life, but I could handle it. Lena would graduate, get a great job, and everything I sacrificed would pay off. That's what I told myself. The resentment crept in slowly, so slowly I didn't notice it at first. It was a random Tuesday when I was scrolling through Instagram on my lunch break. I didn't even follow Lena, but her post popped up because my mom liked every single one of them. There she was, smiling with her friends at some fancy brunch, her plate full of avocado toast and fruit smoothies. Her caption read, "Work hard, brunch harder." I stared at the photo, something twisting in my gut. Wasn't she broke? She just asked me for $150 last week for rent. I scrolled down. Another post. Lena standing in front of a coffee shop, holding some overpriced drink with whipped cream. Everyone at school dresses like this, she said when I brought it up later on the phone. I don't want to look like I don't fit in. I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to say. I was sitting in my rusted-out pickup truck, eating a sandwich I'd bought off the dollar menu, while Lena was out drinking lattes and wearing clothes I couldn't even afford to look at. Still, I pushed those feelings down. Family helps family, right? That's what my parents always said. Every time I mentioned how hard things were getting, they'd brush me off. She's your sister, Sam, my mom would say. You're doing a good thing. You should be proud of yourself. Proud. That word started to feel like a weight. I was proud of Lena, I guess. But what about me? I wasn't proud of the way I lived, driving a beat-up truck, eating cheap food, barely scraping by. I wasn't proud of working 14-hour days with no end in sight. And yet, I kept doing it. I told myself it was worth it. Lena was going to make it big one day, and when she did, all this would have been worth it. I just didn't know how much further I could go. The requests didn't stop. In fact, they got bigger. What started with a couple $100s for textbooks and groceries quickly escalated into rent payments, utility bills, and random emergencies that only Lena seemed to have. She always had a reason, and she always promised to pay me back, eventually. But eventually never came. Sam, I don't know what to do, she'd say, her voice trembling just enough to tug at my guilt. My rent is due tomorrow, and I'm short $300. Can you help? Just this once, please. Didn't I send you money last week? I'd ask, though I already knew the answer. Yeah, but this month's been really tight. My classes are just so overwhelming, and I can't get a job right now. You understand, right? She always made it sound like I was the only one who could help, like her entire future depended on whether I'd send her a few $100. And every time, I caved. I couldn't stand the thought of her failing because I didn't help her when she needed me most. But it didn't feel like helping anymore. It felt like enabling. I started noticing other things that didn't add up. Lena might have been broke, but you'd never know it by looking at her social media. Her posts painted a picture of someone living their best life. Fancy brunches, shopping sprees with friends, weekend trips to neighboring cities, new boots, a trendy handbag, a fresh haircut, things I could never dream of affording for myself. One night after work, I sat in my truck eating a cold sandwich, scrolling through her Instagram. There she was again, smiling in front of some downtown bar with a drink in her hand. The caption read, "Cheers to the weekend. Work hard, play harder. Work hard." I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Did Lena even know what hard work was? I was dragging myself through 14-hour days, trying to keep up with her demands, while she was out sipping cocktails with her friends. It didn't sit right with me, but I didn't say anything. What was the point? If I brought it up, she'd just dismiss me. It was around that time that the family dinners started getting harder to bear. Every month or so, my mom would call and insist that I come home for dinner. "Lena's back for the weekend," she'd say, her voice full of excitement. "We haven't seen you in ages. It'll be nice for all of us to sit down together." Nice wasn't the word I'd use. Dinner at the Parker house had turned into what I liked to call Lena Appreciation Night. My parents would sit at the table, hanging on her every word, like she was some kind of celebrity. Meanwhile, I'd just sit there, invisible as always, quietly eating while Lena recapped her exciting college life. "Oh, we went to this amazing art exhibit last weekend," she'd say, her face lighting up. "It was such a great experience. I think everyone needs to see it at least once." "That's wonderful, honey," my mom would gush. "You're really making the most of your time at Lakewood." "Yeah, I'm thinking about studying abroad next year," Lena said one evening, casually dropping the bomb as she poked at her plate of pasta. "There's a program in Paris. Everyone's talking about it. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Paris?" My dad raised his glass. "That sounds incredible. You should absolutely do it." "I'm trying to figure out how to make it work," Lena continued, her eyes flicking over to me like she already had a plan. "It costs a little extra, but I'll figure something out. Right, Sam?" I set my fork down, my appetite gone. What do you mean, right, Sam? She gave me this innocent smile, like the idea of me questioning her was absurd. You'll help me, won't you? You always do. The room fell silent. My parents looked at me expectantly, as though it was my job, my responsibility, to say yes. I couldn't hold back anymore. How exactly do you think I'm supposed to pay for that? I asked, my voice flat. I'm already working 2 jobs just to cover your rent. Lena laughed, like I was the one being unreasonable. Oh, come on, Sam. You're always working. What's a little extra overtime? It'll be worth it for me, right? Something inside me snapped. I leaned back in my chair, looking at her. Really looking at her. She wasn't asking. She was expecting. She thought my life was nothing more than an extension of hers, a bottomless well she could keep dipping into whenever she pleased. Worth it for you? I repeated, my voice quieter this time. Sam, my mom said, shooting me a warning look. Don't ruin dinner. Lena rolled her eyes. You're always so dramatic. It's not that big of a deal. That was when she said it, the words that would stay with me for weeks afterward. Maybe if your life wasn't going nowhere, you wouldn't be so bitter all the time. Time froze. My hands clenched into fists under the table as I stared at her. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. I looked at my parents, hoping they'd say something in my defense, but they just sat there in silence, refusing to meet my eyes. I pushed my chair back and stood up. Excuse me, I said quietly, turning toward the door. Sam, where are you going? My mom called after me. I've got work in the morning, I said without turning around. I grabbed my coat and walked out, shutting the door behind me. When I got to my truck, I just sat there, staring out the windshield as the anger bubbled up inside me. My life wasn't going anywhere? That's what she thought? I was the one breaking my back to keep her afloat, sacrificing my own dreams while she partied and played dress-up in her little fantasy world. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. By the time I got home, I felt hollow. I collapsed onto my couch, staring at the ceiling, Lena's words replaying in my head over and over again. Your life isn't going anywhere. Maybe she was right. Maybe my life was stagnant. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have a fancy career or big ambitions. I worked, I paid bills, I existed. But what did that make her? She was living on money she hadn't earned, borrowing time she didn't appreciate, and blaming me for not doing more. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the cracks in my ceiling and wondered how much longer I could keep this up. The night of that family dinner stuck with me like a bad taste I couldn't wash out. I kept hearing Lena's voice in my head. Your life isn't going anywhere, like it was burned into my brain. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself it didn't matter, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. Lena didn't see me as her brother. She saw me as a resource, an ATM that never said no. I spent the next week avoiding calls from my parents. My mom tried a few times to smooth things over, leaving voicemails that all sounded the same. Sam, you know she didn't mean it. She's just under a lot of pressure with school. Call me back, okay? Pressure. That word made me laugh bitterly every time. What kind of pressure did Lena really have? Meanwhile, I was barely holding myself together, pulling double shifts and skipping meals just to make sure she didn't lose her apartment. But I kept quiet about it because that's what I'd always done. I didn't hear from Lena until Friday night. I had just finished a brutal shift at the warehouse and was collapsing onto my bed when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I'd regret it if I didn't. Hey, Sam, she said, her voice way too cheerful for the hour. What are you up to? Just got home, I mumbled, already tired of this conversation. What do you need? She sighed dramatically, like she was the one dealing with long shifts and sleepless nights. So, my friends and I are going to this concert tomorrow. It's a last-minute thing, but I'm short on cash. Can you send me $150? I'll pay you back, promise. I sat up in bed, my exhaustion replaced by anger. A concert? You're calling me at midnight asking for money to go to a concert? Relax, she said, laughing like I was overreacting. It's not that big of a deal. It's just $150. My jaw clenched. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Lena, I work 2 jobs just to cover your bills. And you're asking me for money so you can party? Are you even listening to yourself? She sighed again, this time impatient. You're being so dramatic. You work all the time anyway. What's the big deal? You can afford it. That was it. I felt something snap. No, Lena, I can't afford it. I'm skipping meals because I can't afford it. I'm driving a truck that's falling apart because I can't afford to fix it. I'm killing myself so you can live like this, and you don't even care. Her tone changed instantly. Wait, what? What are you talking about? You're fine, Sam. You're always fine. Why are you yelling at me? I'm done, I said flatly. I can't keep doing this. You need to figure it out yourself. What do you mean you're done? Her voice sharpened, the carefree attitude gone. You can't just stop helping me. What am I supposed to do? That's not my problem anymore. I hung up before she could say another word. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I sat there in the dark, my phone buzzing again and again, but I didn't look at it. I didn't want to see her name, her texts, or her guilt tripping. I turned it off, tossed it onto the dresser, and fell back onto my bed. I was exhausted, more than I'd ever been, but at least I wasn't drowning in it anymore. The relief didn't last long. The next morning, my mom called. I let it go to voicemail, but she called again and again. On the fourth call, I finally picked up. What's going on, Mom? I asked, already bracing myself. What's this I hear about you refusing to help your sister? She snapped, skipping the pleasantries. She's struggling, Sam. She called me in tears last night. How could you say no to her? I sat on the edge of my bed, rubbing my temples. Mom, I've been saying yes to her for years. I've paid her rent. I've sent her grocery money. I've covered her emergencies. I'm drowning because of her, and no one even notices. She's your sister. My mom said, her voice sharp. You're supposed to help her. Yeah? And who's supposed to help me? I asked, my voice rising. Because it sure as hell isn't her. Or you. Or Dad. I've been carrying her, and you don't even care. Sam, you're overreacting. No, I'm not. I cut her off. I'm done, Mom. I mean it this time. Lena needs to figure this out on her own. My mom went quiet. I could hear her breathing on the other end, like she was searching for the right words. You're breaking this family apart, Sam, she said finally, her voice trembling. No, Mom, I replied, my voice steady. I'm just not letting you all break me apart anymore. I hung up before she could say anything else. My hands were shaking, but I didn't feel guilty. Not this time. Over the next few days, I ignored the calls and texts that poured in. First from Lena, then from my mom, and eventually from random aunts and cousins who apparently felt the need to weigh in. Lena had run straight to Facebook, painting herself as the victim like I knew she would. I heard about her post from a coworker at the garage during lunch. Hey man, isn't this your sister? He asked, shoving his phone in my face. Sure enough, there was a picture of Lena sitting on her bed, head in her hands. The caption read, when the people you trust let you down, it hurts the most. Her friends had flooded the comments. You don't deserve that, babe. Stay strong. Some people don't understand what family means. You're better off without them. Queen, you got this. I stared at the screen for a long moment, a mix of anger and disbelief boiling in my chest. It didn't surprise me. Lena always knew how to play her audience. But it stung more than I wanted to admit. She didn't tell them the truth. She didn't mention the years I spent paying for her life while working myself into the ground. No, she painted me as the villain. I shoved my lunch back into the bag and got up, needing some air. You good? My coworker called after me. Yeah, I muttered. I just need a minute. I sat in my truck for the rest of the break, staring at the dashboard. I'd given up so much for Lena. My money, my time, my energy, and this was what I got in return. Public humiliation, family shame, and not one single thank you. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Lena, or anyone else, drag me back into that mess. I didn't owe her anything anymore. For the first time in years, I was choosing myself, and no one could make me feel guilty for that. The days following my decision were quieter than I expected, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the calm before a storm. I kept waiting for Lena to show up at my apartment door, for my mom to call me again and guilt-trip me into relenting, but it didn't happen right away. Instead, I found myself caught in a strange in-between state, relieved that I had finally said no but still carrying the weight of years I couldn't get back. Lena didn't stay quiet for long, though. She wasn't the type to let things go. About a week later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. It was Lena's landlord. "Hi, I'm trying to reach Sam Parker," the voice on the other end said. "I'm calling regarding the payment for Lena Parker's apartment. We haven't received rent for this month, and she mentioned you were handling that." My stomach dropped, though I wasn't surprised. "She doesn't live here," I said flatly. "You need to talk to her about that." There was a pause, then an awkward cough. "Right, okay. I'll try to get in touch with her directly. Thanks for your time." When I hung up, I stared at my phone for a long minute. I felt bad, almost, but the anger bubbling up inside me quickly drowned out any guilt. Lena hadn't even bothered to tell her landlord she wasn't getting money from me anymore. She had just assumed I would give in like I always had. The next day, my mom called. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, her voice tight with frustration. "Sam, your sister is in a bad place right now. She's going to lose her apartment. She's been crying all day. You can't just leave her like this." I listened to the message twice before deleting it. Another week passed, and I thought maybe Lena was finally figuring things out. I hadn't heard from her directly, and the texts from my mom had slowed down. But then, one evening after a long shift at the garage, I came home to loud, frantic knocking on my apartment door. I knew who it was before I even opened it. When I pulled the door open, Lena stood there, disheveled and upset. Her hair was a mess, her eyes red and puffy like she'd been crying. She wasn't wearing her usual polished, trendy outfits. She looked almost ordinary. "You can't just cut me off," she said as soon as I opened the door, her voice shaking. "What am I supposed to do now?" I didn't say anything at first. I just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, waiting for her to finish. She shifted uncomfortably under my stare, but she didn't back down. "Please, Sam," she said, her tone softening. "Just one more month. That's all I need. I swear I'll figure it out after that. I'll get a job, I promise." I let out a slow breath and shook my head. "No, Lena, I'm done." Her face crumpled. "You can't be serious. You've always helped me. You can't just stop now. What am I supposed to do?" I straightened up, looking her dead in the eyes. "Figure it out," I said. "Get a job. Budget your money. Welcome to the real world, Lena." She stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to do any of that. I've never had to." "That's not my problem," I replied calmly, though my heart was pounding in my chest. "I've been taking care of you for years. I've paid your rent. I've skipped meals so you could go to brunch. I've put my life on hold so you could pretend everything was fine. You've had time to figure this out, Lena, but you never even tried." Her tears started flowing then, but I didn't budge. "You're so cruel," she choked out, her voice rising. "You're supposed to help me." "That's what family does," I sighed, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. "Family doesn't take advantage of each other, Lena. You've been using me, and now you're going to have to stand on your own." "You don't get it," she whispered, wiping her face with her sleeve. "You don't know what it's like to be me." I shook my head. "No, Lena, you don't know what it's like to be me." We stood there in silence for a moment. For the first time, I think she saw me, really saw me, as more than just her safety net. Maybe she realized how much I had given up for her. Maybe she didn't. Either way, I knew I wasn't going to let her pull me back in. Eventually, she gave up. She turned and stormed off, slamming my door behind her. I watched her walk down the street through the window, my chest tight. I wasn't heartless. I felt bad for her. But at the same time, I knew this was the only way she'd ever learn. If I kept rescuing her, she'd never grow up. That night, my mom called again. This time, I picked up. She came home in tears. My mom said, her voice trembling, "She's devastated, Sam. How could you do this to her?" I rubbed my eyes, leaning back on my couch. "Mom, I'm not doing anything to her. I'm just not letting her take advantage of me anymore. She's an adult. She needs to start acting like one. She's not like you. My mom shot back. She doesn't know how to take care of herself. She's always been the baby of the family. She needs you. No, I said firmly. What she needs is to figure out how to stand on her own. You've all been coddling her for years. It's time for her to grow up. You're tearing this family apart, my mom said quietly. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. No, Mom. I'm just not letting you all tear me apart anymore. She didn't say anything after that. She hung up, leaving me sitting there in silence. The next few days were tough. My mom sent texts. My dad called once, though he didn't say much. I heard through a cousin that Lena was back at my parents' house, and it wasn't going well. She had blown through the last of my parents' savings, maxed out their credit cards, and still refused to admit she had done anything wrong. I wanted to feel bad for her. I really did. But all I felt was tired. For so long, I had sacrificed everything for her, and now it was their turn to carry her. That week, I found a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. I still worked long hours at the garage, but it felt different. I didn't have to check my phone constantly, waiting for the next request or the next guilt trip. I didn't have to live in fear of disappointing someone who didn't even see me as a person. I finally had space to breathe, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The days stretched into weeks, and life settled into a strange sort of quiet. I still heard about Lena through the family grapevine, though I hadn't spoken to her directly since she showed up at my door. My mom called less often, though every conversation we had felt like walking through a minefield. She didn't outright blame me anymore, but her tone carried that lingering disappointment she couldn't hide. She's trying, Sam, my mom said one evening over the phone, her voice tired. She's just having a hard time adjusting. I'm sure she is, I replied flatly, flipping through the mail as I talked. That doesn't mean it's my responsibility to fix it. Mom didn't argue back. For the first time, I think even she was starting to understand. It wasn't easy watching Lena struggle, but I wasn't going to let guilt pull me back into that hole. I had finally started to feel like myself again, and I wasn't about to give that up. About a month later, I got wind of Lena's latest stunt, a GoFundMe page. One of my coworkers, Brian, brought it up during our lunch break. Dude, you've got to see this, he said, shoving his phone in my face. Sure enough, there it was, a sob story complete with a photo of Lena sitting on a bed, looking pitiful. Unexpected expenses have turned my life upside down, the caption read. Anything helps. She had set the goal at $3,000. I stared at the screen, feeling that familiar anger bubble up. Anything helps, huh? I almost laughed at the irony. The page didn't mention a word about how she'd spent years relying on me. No mention of how I worked myself to the bone, so she could live a life I couldn't afford for myself. Instead, she framed it like life had just dealt her a bad hand, like she was some helpless victim. Brian shook his head. Man, I don't know how you put up with that. She sounds like a scammer. Yeah, well, I muttered, taking a bite of my sandwich. Not my problem anymore. And I meant it. Over the next few weeks, the updates trickled in. Lena had finally worn out her welcome at my parents' house. After maxing out their credit cards and refusing to cut back on her spending, they'd had no choice but to give her an ultimatum. Get a job or get out. She chose to leave, of course. Lena didn't like being told what to do. I heard she bounced between a few friends' apartments after that, sleeping on couches and burning through the last of her relationships. It didn't take long for people to get sick of her excuses. Eventually, she ran out of places to go. Then, one day, I got a text from my dad. We need to talk. Please come over. I stared at the message for a long minute, debating whether to respond. I hadn't seen my parents since the night of that family dinner, and I wasn't sure I was ready to. But curiosity got the better of me, so the next evening, I drove to the house I grew up in. When I walked through the door, the atmosphere felt different. Heavy. My mom was in the kitchen, her back to me, scrubbing the same plate over and over again. My dad was sitting at the table, rubbing his temples like he'd been dealing with a migraine for days. Where's Lena? I asked, breaking the silence. She's staying with a friend, Dad said quietly. not looking up. We couldn't handle it anymore. I blinked. What do you mean? Mom turned around then, her face pale and tired. She maxed out everything, Sam. All the cards. We're completely tapped out. We told her she couldn't stay here unless she started paying her own way. She didn't take it well. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. So now you're seeing what I've been dealing with for years? My dad sighed, finally looking at me. You were right, he said, his voice low. We didn't listen to you, and now we don't know what to do. She won't listen to us either. I let out a bitter laugh. You let this happen. You defended her. You made excuses for her. And now you're shocked that she's still acting like this? Sam, my mom started, her voice trembling. We're not asking you for money. We just don't know how to deal with her anymore. She won't listen to anyone. I shook my head. That's not my problem. You need to figure it out. My dad didn't say anything. He just stared at the table, his shoulders slumped. For a split second, I felt sorry for them. They looked like they'd aged 10 years in the last month. But I couldn't let myself get pulled back in. I knew if I offered even an inch, I'd end up right back where I started. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said, keeping my voice calm, but I can't fix this for you. You let her get away with this for too long. She needs to figure it out herself. My mom opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. I think she knew I was right, even if she didn't want to admit it. I didn't stick around long after that. I told them I hoped they'd figure things out and left. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in years. They weren't my responsibility anymore. Lena wasn't my responsibility anymore. For the first time, I could focus on my own life without anyone dragging me down. And that's exactly what I did. Over the next year, things started to change for me. Without Lena's constant demands hanging over my head, I finally began saving again. I picked up a few extra shifts at the garage, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Slowly but surely, the money added up. I found a little house on the outskirts of town, a fixer-upper that needed a lot of love, and I bought it. It wasn't much, just 2 small bedrooms, a kitchen, and a living room, but it was mine. I spent my weekends fixing it up, painting walls, patching holes, and turning it into something I could be proud of. It wasn't fancy, but it didn't need to be. It was mine, and that was enough. I also started reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in years. For so long, I'd shut myself off from the world, working myself into the ground and pretending that was enough. But it wasn't. For the first time, I let myself enjoy the small things. Grabbing a beer after work, having people over for dinner, watching a game on Sunday without feeling guilty about wasted time. Then, one night, I got a text from Lena. Hey, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much you did for me until now. I hope you're doing okay. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to text back, to say it was okay and that I forgave her. But another part of me wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I put the phone down and stepped outside. I sat on the front porch, feeling the cool night air on my face, and looked up at the stars. For the first time in years, I felt free. Maybe one day I'd forgive Lena. Maybe one day we'd talk again. But for now, I didn't owe her, or anyone, anything. And for the first time, that was enough.